people. Welcome to Junkyard Theory, and today marks 1 year since we started all these webinars. And as our special guest, we have Ashley Avis on board. She is a writer, director, and a screenwriter, and very recently she made the Black Beauty movie, which is streaming now on Disney Plus. Ashley, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much for having me and happy anniversary.
Thank you so much. So we were supposed to meet like a couple of days back, but you're a filmmaker, I'm a filmmaker. We both know how things don't necessarily go according to plan. So you want to enlighten us a little bit about,
Sure.
the current adventure that you're embarking on.
Thank you so much for being so understanding. Yeah, we're here from remote Wyoming. You can see we're in this little motel outside of Cody, and we're filming a wild horse documentary. We're trying to raise awareness for what wild horses are going through in our country. They're getting rounded up by helicopters and torn away from their families, and we incorporate that theme in Black Beauty. So we decided after the film came out to keep that going and to keep trying to raise awareness for wild horses of today. And when we were supposed to speak, we went out in the morning to film at dawn because the light is so beautiful and it comes through the clouds and the horses are backlit by the sunrise. And we got off to a little bit of a bumpy start. We ended up, so far we've popped 3 tires, and that day we got lost trying to find a watering hole. And the map and the distance sometimes is very deceiving. So we started going toward this watering hole thinking, oh, that's probably 15, 20 minutes away. And then we got into the half-hour mark and we thought, well, we'll keep going because we'll probably have reception. No, we didn't have reception. We ended up getting lost on the dirt roads. We popped another tire. My husband's my producing partner. He was servicing the other car that had a pop tire, so we got separated. So we're in the middle of nowhere, just hoping he'll find us because we didn't even have a donut. So I'm so sorry, but thank you for your understanding as we sat there in the middle of Utah without help or reception. So, but
I mean,
it's par for the course with documentary filmmaking.
no doubt. I mean, as scary as it sounds, I'm glad you guys are okay because we
Thank
were
you.
wondering, like, okay, where did she go off? Like, is everything all right? But yeah.
Yeah, it does get a little scary when stuff like that happens. Years ago we were making an independent film called Deserted, and I had written a sandstorm into the film. And I had done my research on sandstorms and wanting to make that feel authentic. But when we got on set and we were actually out in Death Valley filming, we looked over the mountain ridge, and all of a sudden there's this blanket of it almost looked like when water boils over a pot. It looked like this foam of clouds coming over the mountain, and our whole crew goes, is that a real sandstorm? And it was. And I had written it into the script, but it's another thing to actually drive through a sandstorm like you're one of your characters. And we ended up going. We went through it and we filmed it. And some of those situations get a little bit scary, but thankfully in that situation and the one the other day we were okay.
Good to hear. I kind of want to, go a little bit back and talk about your origin story. Like, how did you get into filmmaking?
Sure. Well, I always wanted to be a writer. I thought I would become a children's book author, and I still hope to do that at some point in my career. And I rode horses. I was born in Chicago, grew up in Florida. Horses were a big part of my life. I was inspired by books like Anna Sewell's Black Beauty or Walter Farley's The Black Stallion. Those were really important books when I was growing up. And when I was 16, 17, I started feeling this pull to New York City. And I thought perhaps I wanted to be a journalist. And my horse at the time was this beautiful, beautiful horse that she had a back problem from birth, and we weren't able to compete at the level that I wanted to go to the Olympics. And she was my partner. And because we couldn't go there together, and I felt this call to New York, I started thinking maybe my life has a different path. And so I ended up leaving Florida, went to school there, and I started working as a journalist for Nielsen Media. I did a host of different odd jobs. I worked in real estate. I taught wedding couples ballroom dance. I had a web design company, anything to stay afloat in New York City, which is of course very expensive. And I realized journalism wasn't quite it. That wasn't quite my path. And I started interning for a film production company. And I started reading screenplays. And growing up, I loved poetry, and screenplays felt like the visual interpretation of poetry. You have such a limited space to write something incredible. The type of writing that I wanted to pursue. And so I started writing my own screenplays. I saved up a little bit of money to move to Los Angeles. And from there, I took on a couple of other odd jobs, and I saved up enough money to produce a spec pilot. And a spec pilot is something, it's speculative. It's not something for a studio. It's something you're producing yourself. And I ended up writing about my roommates at the time. And that little project got on the radar of the founder of Lionsgate, who became my first champion. And he ended up financing 3 episodes. The show never went, but it was the window into realizing that I wanted to be a screenwriter. I didn't only want to be a screenwriter. I wanted to direct. I really love working with actors, and I love the production elements as well. And that eventually parlayed into, the edit is so important. And I started editing my own work about 12, 13 years ago. And with Black Beauty, the producers gave me a chance. That film was so specific. I begged them to let me cut it, and they did. And that was, it was about a year, and I started going gray, but yeah, no, the getting into filmmaking, I think, and you know this, you have to wear so many different hats to be able to create something that is the interpretation of your vision. And I think coming up that way, and not being afforded the opportunities in the beginning of any big budgets, doing so many different things yourself, I think that's a really important part of growth.
Definitely. About wearing, so many different hats, I totally get that. And, you're coming from an independent film background. At the same time, you've done independent movies too. So could you talk a little bit about, that specific process, like not having, I guess, like the budget to pull something off, and then having to juggle so many different tasks, and the whole stress that kind of comes with it. How do you manage that?
Oh goodness. Well, I'm fortunate now. When I was first getting started, I was trying to do it all myself, and it's really hard to talk about crew rates as well as shot lists. And eventually I met the person who's now my husband, Ed. He came from the finance world and a finance background, and he was playing with some things in front of the camera, and I ended up casting him in a commercial I was directing, and he eventually became my producing partner. So that really helped down the line to juggle all of those things independently. But yeah, independent films are hard. I mean, by way of example, with Deserted, we raised a teeny tiny bit of money, and I feel like once you get started, there's an energy about getting started. Even if you raise something where you can't do it all for that, but you're able to say, we've set a date, we're going to go do this no matter what, especially when you're doing your first or second film. And with Deserted, we location scouted all of those locations. We were driving into Death Valley and Ridgecrest and very remote areas where you can get lost pretty easily. And, just doing all of that ourselves. I didn't cut Deserted. We were fortunate to work with a really, really talented editor that I learned a lot from, but we produced it ourselves. It was down to my mom was coming out to the desert to help with crew lunches because that helped with budget. It's just when you're doing your first couple of projects, or we've been fortunate, we've done a lot of branded content work, but have we really broken into the broadcast world on the commercial side? No, not really. Even with a studio film and working with Disney, it's the film world is hard, but when you go into this, you have to know that, and you have to realize that it might take a decade to get where you're going, but if you love this and you know that you're called to this, you can't stop, you can't give up, and you can't let the timing be daunting. If anything, I think you need to embrace the challenges because they make you better as a filmmaker. You learn more along the way.
100%. And coming to Black Beauty, this was it a Disney funded project, or was it something that was like later acquired by Disney?
It was acquired. So it was a Constantine film financed and produced the film. And they took a big gamble because it was, we had a $12.5 million budget, which was not a lot to make that movie with 50 horses and something that was the story of an entire life with multiple seasons. And we ended up filming that in South Africa for tax considerations and for budget. And we were fortunate to have an unbelievable crew in South Africa. The people down there there's a spirit to South Africa that I have a hard time explaining, but everybody threw their backs in the collar to make that film what it is. We were, I mean, even just, it's a small example, but minutes add up when you're on a film set. And even if you're moving things at a quicker pace consistently, that crew was just so unbelievable. Everybody knew what we were trying to create. We were trying to recreate a story about empathy and compassion toward animals, toward each other, toward the planet. And I can't say enough about our crew from Black Beauty. But yes, to answer your question, it was an acquisition by Disney, and it's Disney. They're the top people. They're the top studio in the world for a movie like that. And we were so fortunate, and they gave us great notes. And as an editor, I grew a lot, and as a director, by taking their notes and trying to interpret why is this a note? What's the note behind the note? What are they really saying? How do I take it? And how do we make the film better? And just being collaborative, and their spirit was very in line with that thinking.
Were there any major changes to the screenplay that you wrote, or like from the notes? I mean, how much did the film change in the edit?
Well, everything changes, but I think the biggest changes really were from the beginning. My director's cut with Beauty in the Wild, and I knew this going in, and I actually cut when I was putting together the first assembly. I actually cut the beginning last because I knew I know myself well enough at this point that I was going to spend an inordinate amount of time on the nature stuff because it was so beautiful. I mean, little baby Beauty running around in the wild, and so the beginning was probably it was at least 10 to 15 minutes longer. It was probably close to 15 minutes longer. And I knew that was going to get cut down. But because you've got to get into the film, you've got to get into the story. In the very, very beginning, the opening sequence where you see Joe on the beach, I didn't write that with Joe, but it was a very smart note to make sure that the audience, and then it worked very well editorially. The moment that I tried it, I really liked it. One of the notes was, we've got to make sure the audience knows what the movie is about. And can we cut Joe into the opening so we know where we're going, even though we don't meet her? We don't meet Joe until I think about the 14 and so minute mark. That's quite late. But when you're telling a story about either friendship or about love, usually the love interest does not come in at the very, very beginning, or the friendship, the best friend, if it's a buddy story, that doesn't come in right away. And that's how I always viewed Beauty. I didn't feel like Joe needed to be in the story by the 5th minute mark or the 10th minute mark. And we were very lucky that the producers looked at the story structure that way as well.
And working with somebody like Mackenzie Foy, she comes off like major studio movies at the same time, and coming into Black Beauty, there was this whole independent feel to the movie at the same time. So what was it like, working with her?
She was unbelievable. I can't say enough about Mackenzie. She's not only a really kind person, she's very down to earth. She's extremely grounded. I mean, the best example is my husband's family came to South Africa because this was a big deal for us. It was our first studio movie as independent filmmakers. Our families wanted to be part of it if they could. So my husband's family flew down, and they were walking around all the trailers and stuff, and they spotted Mackenzie, and she bounded up and she said, "Hi, I'm Kenzie. I'm one of the actors." I mean, and my husband's mom, her name is Maria. She gave her this big smile, and she loves telling the story because that's such a great example of who Mackenzie is. She's a beautiful, bright soul, and she's become an ambassador for our nonprofit, the Wild Beauty Foundation. And we just did this event with the children of St. Jude, who are in Memphis, Tennessee, and they're battling different forms of cancer. And she came out and spent the entire day, and we did a virtual experience for those kids. We have an adopted horse that's battling melanoma, and being authentic to the horses was extremely important to me as a director and a horse person. So months before we shot Black Beauty, I met with Mackenzie and her mom at a little coffee shop, and she had ridden some for the Nutcracker, and she'd done some training, but it was, some of the stunts that I had in Black Beauty, I really wanted her to do those herself. And to ride bareback and to feel comfortable around the horses. And so she started training months before we shot the film. And that leg strength and the physicality of riding horses at a certain speed, or feeling comfortable, or especially riding bareback, that takes more than 2 weeks of training. Your muscles don't develop that quickly. So she did all of that on her own on her own time. And when she got to South Africa, whenever we weren't in a script meeting or she wasn't in a fitting or something, she was at the stable with the horses and developing that bond with the main horses. Especially the horse she interacted with most was called Jenny, and she built this bond with Jenny. And you see that in the film where Jenny is following her around or following her toward a tree, or the scene at night where Jenny puts her head down toward Mackenzie's face as she's falling asleep. All of that was very authentically captured because Mackenzie put in that time and that authenticity and that love with horses.
Like, it definitely shows on screen. I was just telling you before we got on the live session, like the love that went into the movie, it's totally visible on screen. And even like working with animals, this is something that most filmmakers find daunting, but you dove head first into it. How was that process like?
Say that again?
How was that process like working with animals?
Oh, working with animals. Well,
Yeah.
you know, as a horse person, I was so excited to work with so many horses, but it was challenging too, because you definitely want to, and I was hyper conscious of everything when it came to horses. I was always studying them for, is this horse spooky? I mean, we made hard decisions. I made calls that I didn't have to make, but as a horse person, I was very perhaps overconscious about safety, which I don't think is a bad thing. There were moments where we had insurance cleared for a day where Mackenzie was allowed to ride bareback, but the horse she was going to ride, there was one day where the stunt horse was actually a gelding called Indiana, and the stunt rider was taking him through the motions of this bareback ride, and we had our tracking vehicle following the horse. And this horse has a resume that Hollywood actors would envy. He's been in Troy. He's been in every major movie that's shot in South Africa. Very, very experienced, very, very calm. And on that particular day, you know, horses are like people. They have personalities and they can feel great. They can feel excited or fresh. He jumped an invisible log at the very end of the track, and we were far away from the crew. Nobody saw it, but I did. And it was always about making sure Mackenzie was safe. And I knew as a horse person, if he did that with her on his back, there's no way, even an experienced rider would probably get thrown off, and it would have been really dangerous. And we came back and I spoke to our Liberty trainer, Cody, and he saw it too from far back. And it was this decision of, would it be better for the film and our schedule and our budget and everything if we put the actor on the horse? But it wasn't. And so we made that call. But that safety was just paramount throughout the entire project, making sure the horses were safe, making sure the actors were safe. And I don't know how you would do a film that way and without thinking in that direction. But and then there were moments where you don't think as a screenwriter, even as a horse person, what you're putting on the page could even be possible. Like Black Beauty running the river. I had written that scene where Beauty saves a human and she's racing this raging river and gets to the bottom of it and goes into the river and saves a hiker. And our Liberty trainer, Cody, and I, we developed this trust together because of moments like that, because of moments like realizing that, are we pushing this just a little too much? Could this be approved? Yes. Should it be approved? No. So we because of that trust, we found this rhythm of, is this possible? How can we make this possible? And that stunt with Black Beauty, literally racing the river with Terry, we had our greens team actually form a horse-safe path in this national park in South Africa, which has now become a hiking trail. And they created this path that was completely safe for the horse to gallop right near the river, so our drone could go over it. And this was, again, South Africa and the Cape Town area just being so supportive of film. And it was, and like I said, it's now become a hiking path, but Beauty was actually able to race from point A to point B by, I don't know how long it might have been, maybe a quarter of a mile, but she actually raced the river. And there are no CGI horses or major special effects when it came to the horse action. Beauty actually galloped right along the river. We followed her with a drone. She came into the river. The horse team spent weeks training the horses to go into water like that. We built platforms underneath the water and over the river rocks so that they could safely walk in. And that was it was extraordinary working with the horses. And being able to edit that together to to show, even when Beauty's not speaking, even when there's no narration, she's still speaking through her body language and through her ears and through her motion. And that's part of the reason why I begged the producers to let me cut it, because I know horses and I really wanted that language to be authentic.
And going back to writing, so this was essentially like an adaptation of Black Beauty, written by Anna Sewell. So coming into trying to make it like a more contemporary adaptation, what were the challenges that you faced, and how did you like overcome them?
The biggest, well, I grew up with this novel, as so many have, and the Black Beauty changed my entire life. Reading that book as a 6 or 7 year old, I fell in love with the world of horses. And I grew up without, I didn't ride in a super fancy way. I didn't have an expensive horse. I had a couple of horses, but they were little quarter horses and just lovely horses. I just loved the world. And given that novel shaped my life, when I got the opportunity after directing 3 independent films, it would be so easy to take a very valuable title, a valuable piece of IP, and just change the story and make it modern and go an easier route. And I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what are the modern day parallels, because that was what I was tasked with. It was make Black Beauty modern for audiences of today, and make Beauty female. And I decided to make Joe female as well and have that horse and girl relationship. But I really wanted to be authentic to why Anna Sewell wrote the novel. And so I went back and I did a lot of research on Anna and why she wrote the book. And she was crippled as a little girl, and she couldn't walk for long periods of time, even with a cane or a walker. And she was carried by horses very literally. And that inspired her love and her very unique understanding of them. She was one of the first, not one of the first, I mean, Native Americans really were, but she understood natural horsemanship, and she understood that horses can feel what we can feel, and that they have families and they can feel love and loss and heartbreak and joy. And she wrote Black Beauty not to become this massive international bestseller that it became. She actually finished it on her deathbed. Her mother helped her finish the story. Her mother was her editor. She wanted to get Black Beauty into the hands of grooms and the people that worked with horses, and to teach them that horses have those feelings and to be kind to them. And she changed things. She changed our understanding of animal empathy. And I really wanted to honor that message. So when I started researching what wild horses were going through in our country and how disrespectful, the way they're being treated is very disrespectful, which is why we're here in Wyoming trying to raise awareness for them. I thought that the modern day parallel to trying to change something for the horses of our time would be very respectful of why Anna Sewell wrote Black Beauty in the first place. And so that's why Black Beauty is a wild horse in the story. It was a very, very purposeful change. But coming to that was very challenging in writing the screenplay and just trying to figure out the origin story of who Beauty would be today.
And I think you've done like a really good job in making it a contemporary tale.
Thank you.
And what any tips that you might have for anybody else who's trying to adapt like a novel into a more modernized version? What tips do you have?
Well, I think coming back to just being respectful of the original author, and why did they write the story? Why did they come to the conclusions that they did? What is the heart behind it? Doing that research and even looking into, I think trying to traverse every corner of the world of that piece of literature, that property, is important. I think looking into the author's story, looking into just all the reasons that piece of material is written will help lend an authenticity to the story. And if you're trying to modernize something, trying to find the parallels. Like with Black Beauty, there's a scene where Beauty in the novel was set in the late 1800s. She's crossing the river and she's telling her owner something is not safe, because she has the sensibility that animals do. Something's not safe. And I looked into what tasks, what jobs horses have in a modern day setting, and I tried to find a parallel to honor that original storyline without just coming up with something completely new. So I think it's really putting in the work and putting in the time to try to figure out the adaptation.
Gotcha. And being a filmmaker myself, I regard you as another filmmaker, but you don't have so. I think the right way to put this is like the number of female filmmakers is increasing now. And as a female filmmaker yourself, how is there any way that you kind of like try to facilitate more females coming on set and working on set with you, or is there anything that you do to encourage more females to take up filmmaking at any point?
So I do what my husband and I now dub advice calls. If anybody sends me a nice email, I always reply. And if somebody wants advice, even if it's 15 or 20 minutes, I make time for that, because when I was first coming up, I actually approached a female director, and there aren't a lot of us, especially women that have made films of note, and I won't, of course, dishonor this person by saying her name, but I remember I was so nervous. I was at a film festival. This was about 10 years ago. And she was on a panel, and I came up to her and I said, I'm looking for a mentor. Would you consider talking to me? And she said no, that she didn't have time, that she was buried under scripts. And I came away from that so, not bruised. I actually came away from it not feeling nervous anymore. I thought, I'm never going to do that. I want to, because there aren't enough women. There aren't enough diverse voices in our industry. And I think if you get the gift of being given a platform or finding a modicum of success where people want your advice, you have to give that advice. I think that's so important, to encourage and to not just talk about your joys and your successes, but also where you've stumbled. I mean, we've stumbled. We've dealt with, with different. You deal with different guilds, and you don't read the fine print in certain things, and all of a sudden you're in trouble because you tried to save money on not spending a few hours with an entertainment attorney. I think as a filmmaker, or in anything you do, if you're talking to somebody coming up or trying to encourage more diversity in an industry, you need to talk about the good things and the bad things, and give that advice and help the next person not stumble over that particular barrier. I think that's incredibly important. So, but when it comes to women, I think our industry is going through such a change right now, and it's wonderful. I still very much maintain that it can't, to me, and people have different opinions, it's not going to happen all at once. You can't take someone who has no experience and put them in a situation where they're directing a massive film when they don't have the experience or the ability to talk to different departments. I think that there's a little bit of a push and pull right now, where there's such a want for putting women or putting diverse voices in front of the camera. I think it's so important, but we need to foster that in the right way. You still need the experience. You still need to go through the challenges, and you need to understand where you are. Otherwise, the film shouldn't be. I don't know. I don't know the best way to put this. We absolutely need diversity, and I very much foster that with advice calls and bringing people aboard and inviting people to set. But I think everybody needs to put in the work to get to the place that they want to go. It can't come easier because we're in a movement right now, if that makes sense.
It does. Something that I try to do over here is, have bring on board more diversity with males and females on set, because what I find is like that dynamic works really well when you have a female filmmaker on set. Like the insight that they bring is like totally different as opposed to if you had only males on set, and that dynamic just works wonders. And even in the editing room, I think there's a reason like why the first editors were female, and I think that's kind of like carried over. Like it's been lost like in the past few decades, but I think that more female filmmakers should come out and like probably edit their stuff like you do at the same time. So it's great to know that you facilitated that on set while at the same time encouraging people to like put in the work, because without that it doesn't really matter.
And that's why you can see like I said, we're at a motel in remote Wyoming. Sorry. No, but it's so
That's okay.
important. This is why, and everybody comes from different backgrounds. We weren't. My husband and I joke, where's the wealthy uncle that can go finance our documentary about wild horses? But we came up in a way where we worked so hard, doing so many different odd jobs to get where we are, and we still feel like we're at we're nowhere near the place that we hope to be one day. But I think putting in the time and putting in the work and doing different jobs and eventually being able to speak in the different languages with your department heads and knowing the challenges that they're going through because you've done them. I think that that's so valuable, and that develops a different kind of relationship. They're like, especially in the editing room. I started editing because I was trying to launch a production company. I started understanding what the margins were and what color was costing and what I was paying and what the colorist was getting. And I figured, well, why don't I just hire that colorist myself? He's going to make the same amount of money, but we can work together for longer hours. Like it was very creative based, why I started going into post and why I started editing. But the minute I started cutting my own work, I realized, I really love being able to, if I want to work until 2, 3, 4, 5 a.m. all night, go into the studio on a weekend, I can do that because I have the keys to the editing room and I can control the process. And that's not for everybody, but and even if you don't end up becoming an editor of your own work, even if you don't design you don't become a production designer, I think knowing the challenges, knowing the joys and the sacrifices that different department heads go through, it's so valuable when you become a team later on bigger projects.
Definitely. And how important do you think it is for filmmakers or anyone within the creative field to also have some knowledge of some financial knowledge? Because most creatives kind of like keep that aside. They're like, okay, I'm a creative person. I don't need to go into like number crunching and stuff like that. And I've seen like this mentality kind of like mess up so many people. What's your take on that?
Well, I mean, I started when I started in film, I was producing my own work as well, and I was putting together the budgets and the call sheets and doing a lot of that. I think it's really important to have an understanding. And some people, it depends on how your brain works. I mean, I can't find my car in the parking lot. I actually really struggle with. We were out in the wild the other day, and I could not decipher if we were south or north but I can memorize thousands of clips of footage. It depends on how your brain works, and if you can get into the budgeting a little bit, if you have a mind to do that, lean into it, because if you're a director, a filmmaker, or a creative or a writer that can speak to the producers and they know that you know what they're facing and why it's really tough when you ask for the bigger drone or you ask for the Alexa XT versus the Mini on a day, and it's a much, every dollar adds up, and having a knowledge of the budgeting process and being able to, and it comes back to just being able to speak the different languages on a film set, because there are so many. I think definitely leaning into knowing what your producers are struggling with, because it's always, no matter how big your budget, it's always a struggle in some fashion. Having an understanding of the numbers is extremely valuable in every aspect, because then if you know what their difficulties are, you make certain concessions, then you can also go back to them with asks. I mean, on Black Beauty, there are actually only 3 shots in the film of Black Beauty running through this yellow field, and we were in South Africa and the canola fields were blooming, and we weren't in production yet, but we were doing camera tests and makeup tests. And I begged the producers, can we please do a half day in those fields? That is so beautiful. Beauty running through a sea of yellow. And they greenlit that because there were other moments where, when the line producer came up to myself and our DP saying, it was literally about, there were so many things, but particularly for this example, it was about the drone. Can we do 2 days on the smaller drone? Because it's the car stuff, it's the traveling stuff. Do we really need to fly the Alexa? And the DP and I talked about it, and we said, no. But then we went back with an ask. So having that knowledge, and again, I keep coming back to it, but it's so true. Speaking all of those different languages will only help you creatively.
Definitely. And having worked on like a massive studio movie, I mean, well, technically, although the film was acquired by Disney, it's still like, it was made by Constantine Films. So how involved were you when it came to the marketing aspect of the movie with Disney?
Well, sure. Disney was really collaborative. They were the most amazing studio. We were again so fortunate that they wanted to acquire the film. So we had a number of calls. Obviously, in the time of COVID, it was all virtual and going through different marketing presentations of how the film was going to be displayed and what the billboards were going to look like and what the trailer looked like. Well, we saw the trailer for the first time on a Zoom. And of course, I'm a very emotional person. I just started crying. We were in the middle of color grading, and we were in this dark little room, and they showed the trailer, and I just started to, there were tears in my eyes because it was so beautiful. And they really, and again, Disney is one of the biggest studios in the world, and they're the experts in the family space, and they're so incredibly excellent. Of course, everything was going to be beautiful. But I think that there's a different level with things when everybody on the team knows the spirit of what the project is. And there's that extra, even if it's 10% of loving something or pushing something or putting in extra work or time. And that's what the marketing really reflected for the film. The trailer was stunning, incorporating the wild horse issue, the billboards. I always imagined that our key images were going to be Joe and Beauty on the beach. And that's what the poster ended up becoming. And I had those conversations with Constantine, but with Disney, it was, you're not on the phone every day with a team of 50 people. And we were just all so in line with the spirit of what the film was supposed to be. That was really reflected in the marketing very well.
That's nice to hear, like when the studio kind of vibes with the same attitude that you have towards the film. I think that brings a whole new level of collaboration into the mix.
Yeah, it definitely did.
And Kate Winslet, she was the voice of Beauty in the movie. And how did you come about that? Why did you settle on her? Was there like a process?
Yeah, it was. I tried really, really hard to not write characters with people in mind, with actors in mind, unless you're writing something for someone and you know that they either want to do it or it's just so specific that you've got somebody in mind. I really try not to. I try to think of characters more like when you read a novel and you imagine someone in your mind's eye. But when I started writing Beauty's voiceover, it's so specific, the intonations, the pattern of speech. And I've admired Kate Winslet since I was a little girl. And the minute I got her into my head and I started hearing her and her elegance, but she's got a fiery personality, but she's so intelligent. She's very kind. She embodied all the things I wanted for Beauty. And the minute I had her in my head, I thought, oh man, of course you've got, multi-Oscar winner in your head that, and who knows, even when people love something, scheduling with actors can be very difficult, or it's budget, or it's this, or it's that. There's so many reasons why somebody can say yes or no. And we went out to her first and she said yes. And when I got that call, it was like the reality that she was voicing Beauty did not set in until her casting was announced with Mackenzie Foy I believe it was Variety or The Hollywood Reporter broke it. And then seeing it in print, I finally thought, wow, it's real. She's actually the voice of Beauty, this person I've admired so much since I was little. So that was surreal.
And her narration brought took the movie to a whole another level. And I think, like you said, the whole intonations and the emotions, it was conveyed really, really well. So that was a good casting call.
Thank you so much. Yeah, she did a stunning job, and like I said, she really embodied what we ended up developing. It was a rewrite actually when I came across the theme of the Mustang spirit and what that embodied, and Kate Winslet and Mackenzie really bring those elements to the screen through who they are as people and who they are as characters.
So when you decide, when you start off writing a project, do you how does the process work? As in, do you come up with plot elements or scenes first and then start connecting them, or do you set out the theme in your mind first of all and then go along with that, or is it like a combination of all those or none of those?
Well, I start with the world first usually. I always see setting generally first. I see nature, and then I start seeing the characters, and they kind of
Mhm.
come out of the landscape, if that makes sense. And then I start understanding their personalities, and I do tons of rewrites. I mean, with Black Beauty, I think there were 13 official drafts, maybe more. I probably went through 50 or 60 just on my own, and those aren't full rewrites always. Some of them are. Some of those are massive rewrites. Some of them are more minimal. I really love once the movie is cast and you have your actors. I love hearing the dialogue out loud, and I love rewriting to speech idiosyncrasy, because when you cast such excellent people or you work with different department heads, you always have to remember, the story starts with a screenplay, but a movie is hundreds of people working in their different departments and honoring them and having conversations. And just the way that I work and the way my husband works, we're very collaborative, and our mentality is best idea wins. And so when it comes down to casting a film, remembering that the actors, you're not an actor, they're doing the work and this emotional work that you can only hope to understand the depths that they go into with, again, working with just really excellent people. So that you need to trust those actors, to me anyway. This is just my process. It's different for everyone. But I love when the actors have done that work and you hear your words for the first time, and then you hear where it rings untrue, or where you can improve, or getting to know how they say things, not as people, but as actor, as character. And I love doing that rewriting after I hear it, and also asking them, especially, and you have to trust your gut when that little bell goes off and you think, could that be even a few % better? And talking to the actors, how would you as the character say that? And sometimes it's exactly how you had it on the page, and sometimes it's the difference of one word. But I think even the difference of a word, if you can make something just a little bit better, you have to reach for that.
And having done everything, putting in all the preparation during pre-production, there's always going to be moments where things don't necessarily go according to plan, and that's when like the problem solving kind of comes in. So do you have any special maybe techniques or tips on how you try to approach the problem solving on set?
Sure. So let's see, where did you go?
You kind of
Just in case, my phone might die, but I've got my laptop right next to me. So
Okay.
if it does, I'm going to tune right back in.
Sure.
Actually,
no
just let
worries.
me go ahead and do that right now, just in case.
All good.
Okay. If that's okay, I'm going to hop onto this laptop.
It's totally fine.
Okay.
Okay, let me put you. Okay, there you are. Cool.
All right. Great. Is the other one off, Akash?
That's all. I take it down.
Awesome. Perfect. Cool. Okay. Would you ask that question one more time? Great. I've got full coverage.
No worries. So about problem solving. So nothing necessarily kind of like goes according to plan. Like stuff changes on set. What tips or techniques do you have to approach the problem solving whenever some issue arises on set?
Sure. So with Black Beauty, like I said, we and I've heard this from people that have done studio films where you have an absurd amount of money and you think that'll be enough. We won't have any problems, so you can just solve it with cash. That's not the case. I mean, even Black Beauty was the biggest movie that we had done, and we still had so many challenges, especially working with horses, or the horse doesn't want to do this that day, or the biggest challenge we really had was time. We had 6 weeks to shoot the film. We ended up stretching that into more like 7.5. Even here in makeup test days, I begged our wonderful producers to film something. We have the camera. Can we film a piece of a scene? Can we go get a beautiful landscape that we know is 2 hours away, but there's no way that we're going to be able to squeeze that in on a shooting day? I think it's facing challenges requires thinking out of the box, and everybody's different. When something really bad happens, or something goes wrong, or something doesn't work out, I really try to see the positive in it when we can. And trying to, if you've got 12 setups and you have time for 2, how does that make the film better? Sometimes, like on not necessarily Black Beauty, but there's a moment on our independent film Deserted where we had the scene where a character drives up in a car, and we had our coverage of that was too extensive, and the sun was setting. We didn't have enough time. We turned it into a oneer, and it ended up being really amazing and better for the film because we were problem solving like that. So trying to just, if something really bad happens, try to allow the panic to turn into a steely resolve, and try to find the calm in the chaos and try to think clearly. And that's hard to do sometimes, but that's how I approach things. If something really, really bad goes wrong, I go into kind of this mode of very, very oddly calm and trying to figure out how to get out of the situation. With Beauty, we shouldn't have been able to film that movie in the time that we had. I ended up timing all the takes on we had days that I called impossible days, but we made them possible because I really didn't want to change the script or cut scenes. And so to make the days, I would time every single take on my phone. I would time the amount of time in between the takes that it took to set up, and I would average it so that I determined how many takes I could do. It was usually between two to four, usually 2 or 3. As an editor, I'm so freaked out about having one take of anything or literally one clip of something on a hard drive in case something gets corrupted, which has happened before. So I never do only one take, just from a technical perspective. But to make the days on Black Beauty, it was a lot of that timing and a lot of that math to know, okay, by 4 o'clock, we're going to be into this next scene, and then timing it from there. I mean, there are scenes on Black Beauty that we shot in, not a lot of them, but by way of example, the scene where Black Beauty post-race has scraped her knees, and you have multiple characters in the stable that becomes Urshel, and she's in the stall. We shot that in 6.5 or 7 minutes at the end of the day. And and I would watch on the monitor, we have a countdown before you go into overtime. I would watch that and I would time it, and we would cut 2-3 seconds before we went into OT. That's how much we milked out the time. So I think if I was to distill this down, if you go into a panic, find the steely resolve and use your time. Use your time as wisely as you can.
That's brilliant. And dealing with, feedback and criticism, and I think you had to deal, as a filmmaker, you got to deal with this a lot once your film is out there. Being a filmmaker is, in a way, being vulnerable, like putting out your vulnerabilities along with the movie. How do you deal with feedback, criticism, reviews, the critics?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard, especially as an artist and as an emotional person. I'm extremely emotional. I mean, there were many tears shed on Black Beauty, not just me. I mean, everybody was just, it was such a beautiful film. But yeah, it was very different. And we knew this going in. I really tried to steel myself for knowing that we were hopefully going to get good reviews, but certainly not everybody loves everything. We were going to get bad ones too. And some of I'll say it, the New York Times review, I thought was really off. I thought that reviewer really didn't understand what we were doing. And that one really hurt me because it was a major publication who said that we didn't lean into why Hannah Sewell wrote the novel and about the animal welfare message when that was the whole heart of what we were creating. And
Exactly.
I wanted, and it's so hard to not, in a day of social media and you want to reply to everything or you want to tweet to someone. I so badly wanted to tweet to that reporter saying, we tackled the Bureau of Land Management, wild horse roundups, slaughter, the carriage horse industry. How in the world was that the response? And yet the day that I read that review, the Chicago Sun-Times wrote theirs, and it was by a very famous a reviewer named Richard Roper.
Richard Roper, yeah. And
he's iconic and a much bigger reviewer than this young person that wrote the review for the New York Times. He's a very well-respected reviewer of many, many years. And I read his, and he understood. And again, everyone's entitled to their opinion. It's, a world of not everybody's going to get your film. But Richard Roper and his excellence and his expertise and his background, I mean, he called Black Beauty a sweeping epic. His words, I remembered reading them around midnight, and I slept that night because somebody of weight got the movie. So in response to your question, I don't know. I don't think it's a bad thing to be emotional. I mean, we're artists, we're creating work, and I think you're going to go through those tumultuous days where it's hard to read negative reviews or people that don't get what you're doing. But then those sterling moments where somebody really does, you have to hold on to those and remember that, you know, that's what it's about. If somebody gets it, especially somebody of note. So yeah, so it's tough and it's beautiful at the same time.
And to close off, final question: what advice do you have for up and coming filmmakers, people who are writing, directing, producing, doing, wearing many hats, working as independent filmmakers? What advice do you have?
I come down to, I love this word. Being fearless. You have to be fearless, even in the days that you don't feel fearless, even in the days that you feel vulnerable. I Our industry is so hard, but if you feel a call to it, you have to lean in because there's such beauty that you can create. I think that there's, and if you find some success, you have a responsibility with your messaging. You have to always remember that what you're creating is going to live somewhere. And whether 2 people see it or 1 million people see it, you're impacting people and you're touching people. So being very conscious with what you're creating and knowing that it could change someone's life or people's lives. It could change a little kid's life. It could change. With Black Beauty, we've gotten messages from children. I got a message from a child who said she had lost her horse. And she said, I stopped crying finally because I understand where horses go. My horse is looking over me from her bed in the stars. And I sat over my keyboard. I got that email on New Year's Eve. And I started just crying because that little kid stopped crying because she saw Black Beauty. And that's the power of storytelling. And so be fearless with your pursuits and be conscious with your words. There's a responsibility to this industry and to storytelling.
Hearing that was like goosebumps. I remember the exact scene from the movie where horses go to Beauty's mom telling her that, and then she's echoing that back at the end. It kind of caps everything off very nicely. So
Thank
it's
you.
always nice to hear, I guess, feedback from kids because they enjoy something in its purest form. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, no, that's been the most special part is the outreach from children and families. And even if you get big time, we're climbing, we're trying to get there. We've been fortunate with Black Beauty, but also get back to people. If you get the gift of outreach, try to get back to people because it whether you make somebody's day or make their, it's I think it's important to be present and to, if you've got a little kid that comes up to you and asks you to be their mentor in some small way, just try to give back if you get the gift of being given a platform.
100%. Ashley, thank you so much for all the insight and for taking time out of your busy schedule while you're shooting a documentary out there in the United States. So thanks so much again.
Thank you so much. Well, we're going to go find some wild horses. Congratulations on your anniversary. Thank you for having me on the show, and I hope to talk to you soon.
Likewise. People, till next time, this is Junkyard Theory.
All right, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.